I chose 7 more days of holding Thomas's hand over keeping a roof above my head. An 80-year-old widow walked slowly into Judge Harper's courtroom, leaning on a wooden cane. At first glance, it seems like just another routine case. Unpaid rent totaling $2,541. She's dressed in a simple floral outfit, neatly pressed, holding on to an old leather purse as if it's the only thing keeping her steady. Her hands tremble, her eyes are swollen from crying. Her name is Eleanor Whitmore, and within minutes, she will say something that will leave an entire courtroom in silence. The man suing her is Daniel Morrison, a 62-year-old landlord who owns a small apartment building in Brooklyn. But this isn't just a business dispute. Daniel wasn't just Eleanor's landlord. He was her husband Thomas's closest friend for over 50 years. They fought in Vietnam together. They came home together. And for over 4 decades, Eleanor and Thomas lived in Daniel's building, always paying their rent on time, until 3 months ago. Then suddenly, the payments stopped. Eleanor stopped answering calls. She wouldn't open the door. And now Daniel, despite everything they shared, is forced to take legal action. What he doesn't know, what no one in that courtroom knows, is the reason behind her silence. Eleanor and Thomas met in 1964. She was a young school teacher. He worked for the Postal Service. They built a quiet life together, one rooted in discipline, patience, and love. They saved carefully for decades, never spending beyond their means. Over time, they built a retirement fund of $127,000. It wasn't wealth, but it was security. Then came the diagnosis. 18 months ago, Thomas was told he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him 6 months, maybe 9. There was one option, an experimental treatment. It wasn't covered by insurance. It wasn't guaranteed to work, but it offered something priceless. Time. The cost was $8,400 a month. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She chose time. Every month, she paid for the treatment. Their savings slowly disappeared. But Thomas stayed alive. He kept smiling. He kept holding her hand. And that was enough for her. When the money ran out, she turned to credit cards. One after another, she maxed them out. Over $31,000 in debt, just to keep him alive a little longer, because stopping the treatment meant losing him sooner, and she couldn't accept that. Then came the moment that changed everything. 3 months ago, Eleanor had just $847 left. Rent was due. Treatment was due. She couldn't afford both. She sat at their kitchen table, the same table where they had shared breakfast for 43 years, and made the hardest decision of her life. She paid for the treatment. She chose her husband over her home, and she made that same decision again the next month. And the month after that, 8 weeks ago, Thomas passed away in their bedroom with Eleanor holding his hand. He lived 7 months longer than expected. 7 months that cost everything they had. Now she sits in court, facing eviction. When Judge Harper asks her to explain, Eleanor struggles to speak. At first, only tears come. Then in a quiet voice she says, "My husband died." The courtroom shifts. Daniel looks stunned. He didn't know. Judge Harper gently asks what happened 3 months ago. Why she stopped paying rent before Thomas passed. And that's when Eleanor begins to tell the truth. She speaks of the diagnosis, the treatment, the cost, the savings they spent over a lifetime, the debt she willingly took on just to buy more time. Her voice trembles, but her words are clear. "How do you tell your husband he isn't worth it?" she asks. "How do you choose money over the man you've loved your entire life?" The courtroom falls silent. She explains how she watched their savings disappear, but gained something far more valuable in return. Time to sit beside him, to read to him, to play the songs from their wedding, to make sure he was never a moment that changed everything. I had $847, she says. I had to choose. She looks directly at the judge. I chose Thomas. Tears fill the room. I chose 7 more days instead of keeping our home. Daniel lowers his head, overwhelmed. He had no idea. Eleanor continues, her voice breaking. I have nothing left. No savings. No credit. Just a small pension. I can't pay the rent. I'm going to lose my home, but I would do it all again. Judge Harper sits in silence. For the first time in nearly 30 years, she has no immediate response. Slowly, she removes her glasses. Her eyes are filled with emotion. Then, something unprecedented happens. She stands. The courtroom freezes. Without saying a word, she steps down from the bench and walks toward Eleanor. She places a gentle hand on her shoulder. Mrs. Whitmore, she says softly, what you've told me isn't an excuse. It's a tragedy. She turns to Daniel. If your best friend were here and told you he spent everything to save his wife, what would you have done? Daniel doesn't hesitate. I would have told him he owes me nothing. He turns to Eleanor, his voice shaking. Why didn't you tell me? I would have helped. Eleanor whispers, I was ashamed. Judge Harper responds firmly, you didn't fail. The system failed you. Then Daniel does something no one expects. He tears up the lawsuit. She doesn't owe me anything, he says. But Judge Harper isn't finished. She takes out her phone and makes a call right there in the courtroom. Everyone watches in stunned silence. Moments later, she announces a decision that changes everything. Her show will pay Eleanor's entire $31,000 medical debt, every dollar. They will also cover 6 months of her rent. Eleanor breaks down in tears. The courtroom erupts with emotion. 6 months later, Eleanor is still living in her apartment, surrounded by memories of a life built on love. Her debt is gone. She's healing. Slowly rebuilding. Daniel starts a support fund in Thomas's name to help other elderly tenants facing medical hardship, and Eleanor spends her days volunteering, sitting beside those nearing the end of their lives, holding their hands, just as she once held Thomas's, because she understands something most people don't. Time is everything, and sometimes it costs everything too.